Okay, I'm going to start by talking about Seed. We're based in Stroud, but we have been in other places in the UK. It's an organisation that's been around since the 1960s, but has been transformed to something quite different in the last 16 years. I was interested to read on the Rise website that they were into Paulo Freire, which is great because Paulo Freire is one of the key people that Education for Sustainability was based on. And by that, I mean transformative learning. So what SEED does is transformative learning, so that we can actually be effective in what we want to do, whatever that is, and whatever age you are. And it's surprising, really, sometimes what people need some help with. But we have a lot of the principles that I think have been talked about. We have those in the heart of what we do, but then we have to have a practical action program that's trying to reach as many people as possible. So not a small group in Stroud, which is lovely, but we're trying to reach hundreds and hundreds of students who, in my mind, are not getting the education that they want. And so that survey actually was a lot more positive than the SEED survey that we did recently, and we're doing it again. In both of those surveys, it's really saying that young people would like to learn how to live sustainably, which I think is an interesting idea. And it goes beyond voice, which is really what I want to talk about. So I was curious about the title here because I struggle with the word engagement, which is a silly thing to do because I am. How do I get this bigger? Here we go. I facilitate the Community Engagement Board for Stroud District Council. So the word is engagement, but I'm always wondering what on earth people mean by that word engagement, because I think it's a very broad word. And we don't just do climate change, we do sustainability, and we continue to do sustainability because we think the problems are actually at heart about sustainability, and climate change is a symptom of one of those. So what do we mean by engagement? Why are you going to engage with people? Who do you want to engage with? Because like all members of communities, not all young people are the same, and not all old people are the same. And so in the same way as young people get really upset, and I don't blame them, I felt like hitting some people in the past who say, well, we just should leave it up to the young people, they can sort it all out. I've been so close to wanting to hit someone, but the same issue is when you have young people turning around to older people saying it's all your fault. It's all your fault. And it isn't actually. There's a lot of people who are my age and younger who are, who have been working at this all their lives. And as much as you're frustrated, you can't imagine how doing this for 40 years makes you frustrated. But you plod on because it's a social movement, and that's what's making change happen. And then the other thing is, well, how on earth do you think you're going to be engaging? So when you think about the words engagement, we've heard some of these words already tonight, but, are you wanting to include people? You want to consult young people? Do you want to give a voice to? We've heard that quite a few times. Do you want to empower people? Do you want to inform, educate, make decisions? Sorry, it's just done that automatically. Or advise. At SEED, we're about to set up a youth board, and it will really be up to them. It's being designed by a young person, bringing young people in. I'm not sure what they want to do yet, and I think it's wonderful, and we'll see what they want to do. I don't know whether they just want to sit and talk, or whether they want to advise us, or they want to actually do a project. It's entirely up to them what they want to do. But the big thing I've learned in 40 years plus is power doesn't just come with being able to give a voice to. It's also about decision making, real decision making, where you accept the decision that people have made. But in my 40 years of experience, I have found so many people talk to me about they're going to engage with young people, and they talk about action and they talk about participation. But what they really mean is they want to inform and educate. And the number of people who've asked me if I would do an assembly, And I don't do assemblies because I think they're a waste of energy. And I think there are other ways that you could be using your time to help people really make effective action that they want to do. So often this idea about informing and educating young people, and it goes across all of society. It's not just young people. It's not just older people talking about young people, is that they often think that people don't know anything or enough. So let's tell them stuff. And psychologists will call that displacement activity, because you're not doing anything. You're just doing something on the side in the hope that it will achieve change. Or the other thing is that's really common in society, and I've had this with young people as well. They said to me, well, this Young Changemakers program that we've been piloting in a school, I asked them, so what's your theory of change here? What is it you're trying to do? How do you think those actions will lead to the thing that you're trying to do? And almost every student in one particular year said to me, well, we're just going to make them more aware. And then you say, and then? Well, then they'll do something about it. And that's an assumption. And that's the sort of socially critical thinking that we have to unpick, and the sort of stuff that we do at SEED. Both of those attitudes are wrong. And the SEED attitude survey, which you can download a report on there, quite interesting reading, slightly different from the Gloucestershire climate one, because it's a bit more rounded with all of the global issues that young people worry about. And those global issues came out of a focus group with the Stroud District Council Youth Board. Is that what you're called, Megan? I can't remember the acronym, but something like that. Yeah. I think you did a focus group with Rachel, which gave us the words. So I go back to this over and over again, and I've done this ladder with so many people. And although Roger Hart doesn't believe it's a ladder, he thinks that's actually now a bit confusing. And it comes from Arnstein's ladder. It's surprising how many people don't understand the top one here: child-initiated shared decisions with adults. People don't really see that. So these things like include, consult, give voice to, empower, inform, educate, build resilience, make decisions, advise, where would you put those on that ladder? And I have done this in workshops over and over again with people who really feel they've got young people participating. And at best, they're at number 4 or 5. I had a massive row with someone from a water company, not our local one, but a different water company, who was using kids to go home and tell their parents to save water. And they were doing that through schools, and they had an entire program where the kids were trained up what to say to their parents. I was absolutely appalled by it. And she did not believe that she was manipulating those children. So it's a massive social thing where people think because they're doing something for the good, that it almost doesn't matter what they're doing. I know I'm sounding a bit radical here, but whatever. So those of you who might know something about sustainable education or sustainability education, there's quite a lot of thinking and theory around this, but it really is about going from instructing people to allowing people to construct their own realities and their own understandings, and to construct their own sense of agency and learning. So for example, instead of teaching, you focus on learning. Instead of communication of a message, you allow the person to construct meaning that is relevant to them, because they're much more likely to hold on to it. There's a whole range of those, but these are the things that focus SEED on. So for young change makers, those are the starting points that we use. And I've just summarized them here into 5. So we're not going from something is missing or something is wrong. We're going to, what can we build on? What are the motivations, interests, competencies, needs that young people want to focus on, and either change the world, or even a skill that they have decided they want to do. They're student designed and led projects. We just facilitate a space which is highly flexible and variable, and all the things that go into it can be variable as well, depending on what the kids want to do. We use transformative approaches, which I'll explain in the next slide. But this one is important, because I often have a difficulty getting this across to funders in particular. The outcome of young change makers is not necessarily reduced carbon. The outcome is a greater sense of agency, resilience, and thriving. And in the same way as Roma just talked about how young people are feeling there's almost no future for them, you know, we've had conversations with 14-year-olds who have said they don't, you know, when they've been asked, well, what do you think you're going to be doing at 30? And they've turned around and said, well, we won't be here at 30. And that is the most appalling way to live life, and to think about your future and to think about what you're doing now. So that's the really big thing about the Seed Young Changemakers program. There may be reduced carbon, but it's entirely up to the students what they choose. And the big thing that I've learned, and I am an ex-teacher, is you can't wait for teachers to be to feel trained or to feel that they're experts in climate change or sustainability. That is such a slow change mechanism that it is not going to work. And you know, I've done it, I've tried it. When I was in Canada, I was training teachers to do environmental education. There was a book with 500 lesson plans in it. In a day, you might get through 10. They would do 2 of those. Only the 2 that you'd ever shown them. They wouldn't do any more. They'd never open the book. So it's such a slow process, a really slow process. It's almost not worth bothering with. So what are the transformative approaches? Well, critical thinking, socially critical thinking, in some ways that is Paulo Freire, but it's actually asking those questions, you know, how did we get here? Who's got the power? Why is it the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer? You know, those sorts of fundamental questions. There's the action learning cycle, Kolb's action learning cycle. It's absolutely crucial. It's the thing that I've learned absolutely puts learning into the hands of an individual, young or old. Futures thinking, because you need to think about not just as a doom-laden future, but alternatives as well. And how do you start to think about those alternatives, and how are they different, and how might you incorporate them in the way that you're creating your worldview? Obviously systems thinking, because that's been a lot of the problem. But the one that surprises everyone, that they don't think this is a transformative approach, but I think it is because I've seen it do it, is how you understand change. And we don't, as a society, understand how change happens in individuals or groups or society. Part of the program that we do, we actually, that's about the only bit that we teach is how does change happen. The other thing is that we use positive psychology. I don't know if you know of Martin Seligman, but he was the instigator of positive psychology rather than psychologists looking at what was wrong or what was missing. So positive psychology was a complete turnaround for psychology, I think about the 1980s. He became head of the American Association for Psychologists, even though he came from a really, really poor background. And he's researched this for a long, long time. And he's come to what he calls the PERMA model, which he says leads to well-being and thriving. And I know people in Norway and Sweden who are using it in sustainability. And when you think about it, it's actually quite sensible. So the way we feel that we are thriving or feeling good about ourselves and a sense of well-being, whether it's out in nature or whether it's just the work that we're doing at the moment, first of all, you have to have positive emotions. And if you can have those positive emotions about anything that you're doing, that builds that well-being. The engagement has to be real and authentic, which is something that's already been said. You need to develop those good relations, which the other 2 previous speakers have been talking about. Meaning means what you do has to have meaning to you. And that's really important. And you have to have that sense of accomplishment. Now, they sound quite common sense, and they are common sense, but you'd be surprised how rarely people think about designing them into programs. So what is Young Changemakers? It's a year-long program where students work in teams on sustainability projects of their choice, using the action learning cycle, Kolb's action learning cycle approach. The adults facilitate the space, resources, encourage reflection, communication, and celebration. But it's really up to the students that we do this in schools with, but we can do it in other places. I'm sorry, why is doing this? This idea about linking to the community or school. So younger students tend to do projects within the school, whereas older students tend to do projects in their community or even globally, if there's something that they really want to do. And as I've said before, we found one of our main tasks in facilitating this space is to help young people understand how change happens and how they can make it happen. Turns out that's what I'm doing with the Community Engagement Board as well, because even there, thank you, Megan, even there, we don't always understand how change happens. So I thought I'd finish with a couple of case studies. Oh, I meant to delete this bit anyway. The first one is a Japanese boy who didn't speak to me at all for the whole year. And I thought he was getting nothing out of the whole thing. I only went in 4 times, but he just sort of, he worked on his own, not in a group. And at the end of it, he reflected and he said, I thought I knew what sustainability was, but I now realize I didn't. It's not about recycling or reducing use of paper. It's about communicating with people. I have realized I don't have those skills and will look for courses to help me do this. And the next is a case study, which is really heartwarming. Two boys decided that food waste was a real problem in their school. So they decided to go and talk to the catering kitchen staff. And at this point, they're doing what almost everyone does. They're assuming that no one is doing anything about this and they've not thought about it. Anyway, they went to the staff, but they already had some ideas and they were just waiting for permission to implement them. So the boys were thwarted at that point. Since the boys thought that if students understood where their food came from, they would waste less. That was their theory of change. If you understand where it comes from, you'll care for it more and you'll waste less. So they decided to get some chickens. The school refused. We don't to this day know why. It could be foxes. It could be health and safety. Who knows? They never told the boys. So this is now May and the boys started in September. So they haven't given up. So they decided to grow vegetables because they were still hanging on to this idea that if you know where your food comes from, you're less likely to waste it. So they decided to grow vegetables and they achieved this really quickly. So they got raised beds done really quickly. But the catering company that supplied the school with lunches could not use the vegetables. Again, no one knows why. No one knows why. I suspect they've got a contract with someone else. The boys still didn't give up, so they decided to carry on growing and they decided to give the vegetables to the local food bank. And this is the best bit. They then realized at the end of the year that they needed to train younger students up to keep the garden going. This they did the next year and the next year. So that's what, if you can apply all of this stuff into a program, this is what you can do for young people to give them that sense of action competencies, that sense of hope. They were so thrilled, these boys, with what they were doing. They wrote to Prince Charles, well, now King Charles, but they wrote to him because they were just thrilled with what they'd managed to achieve. And that is that sense of hope and agency that we're really trying to do. We have other programs as well, all based on learning for sustainability. Changemakers is a course that we do for adults. We also do a whole institution approach for educational institutions where you basically start modeling and experimenting with a systems approach in your school or college or university, and then young change makers. Thank you.